Hello everyone, welcome to my online prep. Today we'll start with chapter 8, that is communication. In this chapter, we'll be learning about communication, what is organizational communication, what are the different types of communication, barriers to effective communication, how we can overcome these barriers, steps to develop effective communication, and HR and its relation with communication. So let us start with the first topic. Communication in general means the act of conveying messages from one individual to another or from one place to another. So when we use certain form of languages, symbols or actions so that the message in our mind is understood by the person standing in front of us, that is known as communication. Formally, it is a term that is derived from the word communico. It is a Latin word which means to share, or communis, which means common. So, sharing a common message between one or more individuals, whether they are face to face, present, or indirect manner, that is known as communication. So, there is an involvement of at least more than one person for communication to take place. If we talk about organizational communication, so until the 1950s, this discipline consisted of a few professors within the speech department, and they had particular interest in speaking and writing in the business setting. So some professors were there. They were developing, they were conducting research as to how in business settings speaking and writing can be used for communicating. Several publications were published at that time using the term organizational communication. Then in the 1950s, this largely focused on the role of communication in improving the organizational life as well as the output. So now messages were transmitted, or in the research this was shown that communication took place to increase the productivity of the organization. Then in the 80s, the field turned away from the business oriented approach towards a more communication in the activities of the organization. So now the constitutive role of communication was taken. And then finally in the 1990s, we saw that scholars were more focused on communication's possibilities to oppress or liberate the organizational members. Communication can either oppress the members or it can liberate. If communication is more open, then it would lead to better emotional as well as a healthy environment in the organization. So within the organization, communication takes place among individuals or groups. It can be between the organizational levels, that is between the verticals, or even the horizontal, that is between the workers of the same level. So communication takes place through the prescribed channels. Now let us try to understand what is organizational communication. So organizational communication, it is today an academic discipline. It today is studied as a science, embraces the study of symbols, messages, media, interactions and relationships, be it in a corporation, government agency. But this was not always the same. Earlier, the traditional studies that were conducted on organizational communication, they had certain assumptions. First, they believed that humans act rationally. They felt that they have the correct information, complete information, so they would make right decision. Then communication is primarily a mechanical process started from the encoding of a message by the sender and decoding of the message by the receiver. Herein the message that is transferred remains the same, the meaning does not change, there is no distortion. And third, organizations are mechanical things. Even the employees that are working in the organization are considered a part of the mechanical structure. So what works in one organization may not work in another similar organization. So these were the traditional assumptions. But now the roles have changed. Parallel with several other disciplines, communication is seen more as an intentional act that is designed to transfer the idea. So research expanded beyond the issue as to how to make people understand, and more towards like how to define an issue, who am I, in several contexts, how the message can be interpreted. So now these assumptions have changed. In the early 1990s, Peter Senge developed new theories on organizational communication, and these theories are now known as the learning organization and systems thinking. They believe that people working in the organization, they are learners. They learn from their behavior, past experiences, even modeling the behavior of their superiors. So these new theories were developed. Let us now talk about some communication approaches that are used in an organization. Foremost, communication can be divided into formal and informal communication. Formal communication are those parts that are under the recognized communication system of the organization, such as staff meetings, union management meetings, the branch managers held conferences, performance review meetings. These are the formal communication. They have a proper structure that is followed. There's a hierarchical structure. Information flows from the top superiors to the workers that are under them. Then there is informal communication that take place inside and outside the organizations. This is in an unstructured manner. Unstructured manner comes under the informal communication between the workers of the same level. Then we have grapevine. Grapevine is somewhat, we can call it as diagonal. So formal is vertical, informal can be horizontal. Grapevine communication is one type of informal communication, and it is diagonal. It is between the verticals. It is between the different levels in the organization. They can also take form of rumors. There's no credibility to this type of communication. Then we have upward communication. Herein, this is another classification, upward and downward communication. Upward refers to from the subordinate to the superior in this direction, from the subordinate to the superior in the form of complaint, grievance, suggestions, or feedback. It originates from the subordinate to the superior. So it moves in the upward direction from the bottom to top. For example, communication from branches to the regional office, from regional office to the zonal office, and from the zonal to center. These are upward. And downward communication is also known as top down communication. Herein messages move from the top to the bottom, that is from the superior to the subordinate in the organization. So these take form of instructions that are provided, guidelines, or even orders, etc. So these are the different approaches of communication that exist in the organization. Next topic is communication patterns, or we can also say communication networks. So the network of communication is similar. It is familiar to most people since we all have had frequent contact with the concrete networks, such as through telephones, highways, electrical power lines. But there also exists a social structure wherein the type of communication is hard to identify. This difficulty stems from the fact that communication network, it is comprised of, it contains human behavior, the human behavior that changes over time rather than the concrete physical material. The concrete physical materials like the wires, pipes, here the social structure includes more of the human behavior. So communication networks then are the regular patterns of the person to person contacts that we discern as the people exchange information. So the people are changing information, transferring information in a human social system from person to person. These are referred to as the communication networks. And by observing the behavior of the people, we can infer who is informationally connected to whom, and we can also infer the communication network. Once we know about the people who comprise the elements of one particular system, then we can say how they are arranged. That is, what is the arrangement of the structure or network, whether they are formally arranged or informally. This will help us describe how the overall communication system will operate and how it is related to the other important variables. So these networks are another aspect of direction and flow of communication, how the communication flows from one person to another, from one level to another. Herein, many researchers have shown that patterns or networks, they influence the people in several important ways, and communication networks may have affect the group's completion of the assigned task on time, the position of the de facto leader, or even affect the group members' satisfaction. So, group communication or the network that is created in a group is very important for its success. One such research in the communication patterns was conducted by Harold J. Levitt in 1950, and they considered to be the most important categorization. The categorization that is given by Harold J. is considered one of the most important one. This is also known as the Levitt experiment, where the experiment included 5 people who had to play a game similar to Clue. So how this game was given? Herein, every member, each of the 5 members, had given 5 symbols with them. They had 5 symbols with them and they had to find out which symbol they had in common. So they in the beginning did not know which people had the same symbol. They had to find it out, and if all the information could be gathered, the puzzle could be solved. 5 people were placed in the cubicles with slot 6 switches to exchange information. So they were given a game to play. They needed to identify which symbol they had in common. And these cubicles were placed in the different shapes. Star had the wheel symbol, Y, chain line, and circle. So people had slots in which they could write messages and send according to these patterns. It was basically done to find out which pattern could be better to communicate effectively and quickly. And these communication patterns that have been developed by Levitt for 4 and 5 member groups. These are the circle, chain, wheel, Y, and network. So you need to remember these. These are the patterns that have been given under this research conducted by Harold J. Levitt. Next, we have the direction of communication. For example, consider to what extent a subordinate is free to communicate to the superior, as well as how they understand or does not understand the message. Is it possible for the subordinate to question the superior on any decision, whether they are free to ask for clarification, suggest modification? So all of these questions, they come under the direction of communication. Herein, if we talk about formal communication, so they occur, for example, in the traditional military organization, which have one-way directional characteristics. The leaders, they give orders, and followers have to simply follow these orders. On the other hand, like we discussed in informal communication, communication is more free among the members. So on the basis of a number of experience, again, Levitt has formed these conclusions. He has given the directions in which a communication can work. First, one-way communication is faster than the two-way communication. That is, when the leader is giving orders and the subordinates are following them, it is faster. Definitely, because once the order is given, communication is complete. Second, two-way communication is more accurate than one-way communication, because here the follower can ask for clarifications. Otherwise, in one way, they simply have to understand in one go what the communication was provided, but in the two-way communication, they can ask for better understanding. Third, receivers are more sure of themselves and they make more correct judgments of right or wrong when they are in the two-way system, because they understand the message more properly. They can ask for corrections, they can ask for clarifications, and can make sound judgments. Fourth, the sender feels psychologically under attack in the two-way system because his receivers pick up his mistakes and oversights and point out to him. Some cases this might happen, that under the two-way system the leader might feel that his decisions are being questioned by the subordinates. And fifth conclusion was that the two-way method is relatively noisier and more disorderly. The one-way method appears neat and efficient. Basically, we can say that there are advantages of both one-way communication and two-way, as well as there are disadvantages. So if speed is necessary, or we can say direct profit is necessary, then one way can be chosen. On the other hand, communication, if it depends upon more emotional or welfare organization, then two-way communication has to be adopted. So on the basis of the goal of the organization, the direction of communication can be selected. Now we will discuss a few important theories of communication. First, we have theory given by Shannon and Weaver. This is known as the Shannon and Weaver model of communication. This was specifically designed to develop the effective communication between the sender and the receiver. Also, the factors that can interrupt the communication process are known as the noise factor. At first, the model was developed to improve the technical communication only, but later on it is widely applied in the field of communication. So it has various components, various concepts like information source is the sender, then we have the transmitter or the channel, then we have the signal, received signal, receiver is the person who will finally decode the message, and destination. And in between this process there is the noise structure. So what happens is information flows from the information source, that is the sender, to the encoder. Encoder is the transmitter. So we'll write it here, sender, encoder, then we have the channel in which the signal and received channel is there, then receiver is the decoder, and destination is the destination now becomes the receiver. In between there are some noise sources that have to be removed if we want communication to be successful. Then another important element was from the receiver, information flows back to the source, and this is known as feedback. After this, the communication process is complete as per Shannon and Weaver model. Another model is given by Henry Fayol. Henry Fayol basically focused on the formal structure of the organization, in which he emphasized authority, unity of direction in which the information has to flow, order, as well as subordination of the individual interest. So he believed in the scalar chain in which information has to flow. According to him, there are set of principles. First, how an organization should be structured. Structure should be a formal one. Second, how managers should handle their power. This comes under how they are using their authority. Third, how employees are rewarded. The only function here of the employees, they are not involved in the communication system. They are given rewards for following the orders. And then finally, we have the employees' attitudes, which is again related to their following. So, this was the thoughts of Fayol's for the organizational communication. And third theory is given by Chester Burnett, that is known as Chester Burnett's thoughts on organizational communication. He identified communication as an important management activity and examined its elements and issues. So it is a part of the management activity that is undertaken by the organization, elements that are involved in it. So according to him, communication is a major shaping force. It provides shape to the organization, and communication makes the organization a cooperative system in which cooperation is there, and links the purpose of the organization to the human participants. So he has brought out some concept of authority and superior subordinate relations, and gave some guidelines in this respect, how there should be a relationship between the superiors and the subordinates so that the human participation can be encouraged. Guidelines are: first, the channels of communication should be definitely known. That is, the subordinate should know in what way communication would be delivered to them. Second, there should be a definite formal channel of communication to every member. In today's time, emails are there that are in a formal format so that information is provided. The line of communication should be direct and short as possible. There should not be any medials, that is, there should not be any distractions in the message that is provided. It should be direct and short so that it is easily understood. The complete formal line of communication should be normally used. The person serving the communication center should be competent. The person who are delivering the message, let's say from the superior to the subordinate, then they should be competent. They should be able to encode the message and shape it in a manner that is understood. The line of communication should not be interrupted while the organization is functioning. And finally, every communication should be authenticated. So these are some of the guidelines that are given by Chester Bernard for effective organizational communication. So these theories show us how communication in the organization can be structured. Next topic is types of communication, under which first we have interpersonal communication. This refers to the face-to-face communication between individuals. So such communication may take various forms. Messages can be verbal, non-verbal. Messages can also consist of gestures, faces or expressions that come under the visual communication or body language, as well as there is written communication. So the non-verbal communication is about the language, the way we speak out loud and communicate our messages, the tone in which we speak, the words that we use. We should be using simple words, complex jargons should be avoided. So this comes under verbal communication when we are interacting one to one. Non-verbal communication consists of the body language as well as inflection influences that have impact on our messages, such as the way we stand, the way we use our hands comes under the non-verbal communication, and it can consist of financial difficulties that should be understood by the organization as well. Then visual communication refers to the use of images to communicate your message visually and clearly. Graphs can be used, pie charts, etc. And written communication leveraging the written word to make your point in text. Emails, messages, etc. They can be used as the written communication. So there is verbal, non-verbal as well as interpersonal. Another important facet of communication is body language. Several researchers have shown that 55% of communication is conveyed by the body language that we use. This consists of the use of eye contact, gestures, and facial expressions. If we make eye contact with the person we are communicating with, it refers to confidence. Gestures should be same. The what we are saying should be reflected in our actions as well, and facial expressions. Then out of this, 38% is conveyed in the voice by its quality, use of tone and inflections. The tone in which we are talking. For example, if we are giving a happy message, but we are not at all excited, so it would not create a sense of enthusiasm in the person listening. So the tone definitely matters, and only 7% is conveyed in the words that we use. Only 7%. The message that we are giving, only 7% is used in words. Rest, the person who is listening, 38% is conveyed in the voice. So the way we communicate also plays a large role when we are making a good first impression. Again, body language is a dominant factor. It includes the posture that the individual holds, the handshake, how firm our handshake is, also the way we are dressed. So if one wants to send out a message of professionalism, it is important to have a good upright posture, use good eye contact, open body language, and have a firm handshake. Also, dressing important is a must in a work situation. The appearance, well-groomed person, this has a positive impact on the person. So, hand and arm movements are very expressive. We need to learn how to use our hand for emphasis. For example, folding hands shows that we are being rigid. It indicates a closed defensive attitude. Placing hands in the pocket, if we are, then it refers to fidgeting or nervousness. And touching your face or neck while talking, it can be either discomfort or embarrassment. So hands are very expressive. How we use our body is very important in communication. We have already discussed about formal and informal communication. Under formal communication, the way we are talking or communicating with our superiors is different from when we are talking to our friends or closed ones. Then we have internal and external communication. Internal communication is the information exchange within the organization. Messages can be exchanged via personal contact, telephone, email, intranet, that is only accessible by the employees. So employees of the organization, within the employees, or from the superior to the employees. It is within the organization, and it is a way of information exchange within the organization that can be vertical, horizontal, as well as diagonal. It helps us in improving the task, performing the work, developing a clear sense of organization, and promptly dealing with potential problems. So in the internal communication, information flow goes upward. It can also go downward, horizontally, diagonally. But when we are talking about external communication, information exchange goes both within the organization and outside of it. So now it is not necessary that the information is accessible only to the employees. Organizations, they communicate with the outside world on a daily basis. They have communication with the suppliers, media, newspapers, advertisements, etc. And again, external communication can be formal as well as informal. Formal when we are dealing with the suppliers, informal can be when we are dealing with the people that are close to the organization. So internal and external communication is also there. Also in the modern world, we face some communication issues. That is basically because of the use of technology. The modern world today relates to electronic messages such as email and instant messaging. So these type of communication channels, surely they provide the benefit of speed for speedy communication, but these methods, they communicate rely words mostly exclusively that leave out the subtitles and the nuances of the non-verbal cues and behaviors. So with ease and speed, there also occurs some miscommunication and misunderstanding that can easily happen in these forms because there is no personal touch to the information. So in the modern world, communication, that is, although technologically aided, it is the key and the heart of the every type of work that we do in our personal as well as professional life. It is a medium through which we understand the clients as well as the customers' needs and their goals. Then they decide how to work together with the organization. So communication acts as a way of or a key driver of the processes. But now modern communication is a double-edged sword. That is, it is capable of demotivating and alienating the employees as well. And on the other hand, it is can be used for building an atmosphere of distrust and enmity in the organization. So there are some issues that are faced because of the modern communication channels. Let us discuss those issues. These issues are known as barriers to effective communication. First, we have on the psychological front, that is communication overload. Perhaps this is the most common communication problem that occurs. That is, too much information is there. The amount of information exceeds the capacity of the individuals to absorb and process it. This especially is likely to happen in the higher phases of the organization, wherein the amount that is spent, the time that is spent on understanding the information or communication is the largest. So when a unit starts approaching the communication overload, there are some lowest priority messages that are not sent at all. For example, here the dependence on emails, Facebook, and WhatsApp, there is some information that is lost because of this too much information. Another issue is when the organizations are just getting started, their leaders can often price themselves as not being burdened with what seems as the bureaucratic overhead. That is the extensive written policies and procedures. So they avoid this. Writing something down can be seen as a sign of bureaucracy and is avoided. So when the organization grows, it needs more communication as well as feedback to remain healthy, but the communication is not readily available. With the result, there is increasing communication. So unless the communication, the management matures and realizes that there's a need for increased reliable communication, this problem cannot be solved. Another frequent problem is the management not really valuing the communication or assuming that it can simply happen. That is, when they intend or when they need to give the communication, it will automatically happen. So they do not understand the need for developing a good communication system. Then rumors are the false information, and if they are not tackled immediately, it can lead to massive amounts of miscommunication. For example, rumors that the company is going to lay off large number of employees in the future can lead to distrust among the employees, and they may not give their 100%. Then when personnel are tired or under stress, it is easy to do what is urgent rather than what is important. So herein misunderstanding becomes a common occurrence, and again if too late before the correct picture emerges, it can lead to problem for the organization. So misunderstanding is a common occurrence. Communication problems can also arise when the management simply sees no value of communicating with the subordinates. That is, they do not think that it is really important that communication should involve the subordinates as well. They feel that subordinates should just shut up and do their jobs, but that is not true. So these are some of the psychological barriers. Apart from these barriers, there are some general barriers as well. First is badly expressed messages. If there's not a sense of clarity and precision, then the message is badly expressed. There can be inaccuracies, repetitions, or ambiguities in the message. This makes communication process ineffective. Second, faulty translations. Now, if the superiors, they are using very technical or specialized language, but they are not correctly decoded by the subordinates or the people to whom the message is sent. So these messages will not be understood who do not have this type of special knowledge. Then inattention. If preoccupation in the mind of receiver is there, that is, they're not carefully listening to the message, then this is one of the major psychological barriers in the communication. In such situation, the effects of the communicator will fail. Fourth can be the loss by transmission and poor retention. If the receiver hears the message but they forgets about it. So various levels in the organization, the communication passes through, and successive transmission of the same message are increasingly inaccurate. So the poor retention of the information is another problem. Then vague and unclarified assumptions. If the message is vague and it is not clarified at the receiver's end, then it leads to confusion as to what they need to do with this type of communication that is provided. So communication should be clear from all types of assumptions or doubts. Emotional or psychological barriers that we have already discussed. Some communication disruptions can occur because of the emotional or psychological status, both of the sender as well as the receiver. Herein, a spirit that is known as meta message. It is when a very sharp message is decoded. So, perceiving this meta message, the emotion of the receiver plays an important role. The receiver should be in a good mood, then only they would correctly understand the message. Then distrust of the communicator. Communicator may have their own judgments or illogical decisions or frequent countermanding of the original communication by the communicator. So in that manner, both the sender and the receiver, there are some psychological as well as emotional barriers. Again, repeated experience of this type gradually reduces the employee's interest in the communication. Then noise can be because of the faulty instrument or media through which the communication is transmitted, or it can be external noise, environmental noise at the places of the sender or the receiver. So this noise may be on account of various reasons, and if noise is not controlled, it may not be possible for the receiver to listen anything. Then personal factors such as people belong to different language groups, cultural and geographical backgrounds. This can also act as barriers to the premise of language and culture. Then apart differences in the hierarchical process, then there are biases, fears and egos. And finally we have unconducive organizational climate. If the organizational climate is disturbed, thereby not conducive for openness and trust, then avoidable barriers in communication would emerge. So, in case of the conducive climate, it fosters an environment wherein communication is open and there is mutual trust among the employees. But if that is disturbed, then it would emerge as a big problem or barrier. So, these are some of the barriers to effective communication. Communication also plays a very important role when dealing with the customer relations. It is an accepted fact that good gestures play a very important role for enduring meaningful customer relationships in any business context. So, good gestures and niceties, these are essential for enduring the customer relationships. If we want to have long-term customer relations, so it will depend on the ethical dimensions as well as the values in communication. If we are able to build a good relationship, a relationship in which the customer is trusting the organization, that is the result of ethical communication. Thereby, businesses are committed to these ethical values. They are likely to be more endured in the market. They are more competitive and highly profitable. On the other hand, unethical gains might be short-lived and unable to retain a large customer base. So ethical business entities build through core principles as well as the value systems. These value-driven businesses prioritize customer interest over an unfair advantage. So we are emphasizing the role of ethics in the business organization. Ethics like providing full information as well as complete information to the customer, dealing with any kind of grievance that they have, taken consideration the feedback or suggestions that are provided. So these are the cardinal principles for communication, that is adequacy, transparency and consistency. The communication process should be adequate. It should be in a formal yet a friendly manner. Transparency again refers to the information, and consistency means continuously being available to deal with the problems of the customer. So adequacy implies that all relevant information to the stakeholders for a fair assessment. Transparency ensures openness and prevents attempts to conceal information, and consistency requires unified communication across all the organizations. So these are important aspects. Speaking by all, these are the factors that will represent good communication and lead to better customer relations with the client. Next topic is steps for effective communication. We have established that groups cannot exist without communication, and communication involves the transfer of ideas, the content, as well as the meaning to all the groups. So idea or information can be passed on only through the transmission of the meaning. For this process to be complete, communication should be effective. Now, what are the steps that the organization can take for communication to be effective between two or more people? First, unless the management comprehends and fully supports the premise that organizations must have high degrees of communication, the organization will remain stale. That is, too often the management do not understand, they do not value the need for communication, and they learn the need for communication by having a response to the lack of it. They only understand it when higher problems are faced by the organization. So first step is to make the management understand the need for effective medium. So effective internal communications, they start with effective skills in communication. All the employees, all the superiors, they should have the basic skills in listening, speaking, questioning and sharing feedback, the formal ways in which communication can be done in the organization. So these can develop some concerted review and practice. And perhaps the most important outcome from these skills is conveying that the value hearing from others and hearing from you. Good listening skill is important. We should listen and then respond. We should not respond directly. We should not cut individuals when they're speaking. So listening is important. And herein, sound meeting management skills can go a long way towards ensuring effective communication. Also, a key ingredient for effective communication is that each person taking responsibility to assert when they do not understand a communication or suggest when and how someone could communicate more effectively. So there should be a good department, a vertical that would identify the individuals in the organization who are not able to communicate effectively. Then practices should be conducted to develop those skills in them. So taking responsibility is important. Now let us discuss some of the strategies that can support effective organizational communication. First, in the case of downward communication, that is top down, from the superiors to the subordinate. We should ensure that every employee receives a copy of the strategic plan. plan that is developed by the management. It should include the organization's mission, vision, value statement, goals, and how these goals will be reached. This is the first step of communication. Second, ensure that every employee receives an employee handbook. It should contain all the up-to-date personal policies. A procedure should be developed as to how the routine tasks are conducted and should include in the standard operating manual. Again, how the organization is working, what are the goals, what are the up-to-date policies, how these goals have to be achieved. Also, a copy of job description and organization chart. What are the responsibilities? What are the expectations from each and every employee? Then, staff meetings should be held every month so that report can be made on how the organization is doing, the major accomplishments, concerns, and announcements. Leaders and managers, they should also attend these meetings. They should have a face-to-face contact with the employees at least once a week. Regularly holding meetings to celebrate the major accomplishments. This would motivate the employees. The employees perceive that it is important. It would give them a sense of direction and fulfillment. And finally, ensure that all the employees receive the yearly performance reviews. This should include the goals for the next year, the updated job descriptions, accomplishments, areas of improvement. Basically, before starting with a particular goal, all the employees should have the complete knowledge as to what is the goal and how it is to be achieved. This is under downward communication because this information has to be transmitted from the superiors to the subordinate. Then, in the case of upward communication, that is from bottom to top, from the subordinates to their superiors. So we should ensure that all the employees give regular status reports. It should include a section for what they did last week, what they are going to do next week, their actions and issues. All of this information in a report, also in a formal manner, should be provided. Use management and staff meetings so that feedback can be conducted. Feedback should be acted upon. It should be written down and get back to it if there are any problems or suggestions. Then respect the grapevine. It is probably one of the most prevalent and reliable forms of communication. So if the management hears about any rumor, it has to be clarified as soon as possible. So major movements in the organization usually first appear when the employees feel safe to venture their feelings. And third is the case of cross-sectional information. In this communication, the management philosophy and corporate objective, organization has to encourage a cohesive and cordial communication. This comes under the cross-section of the business vertical. So marketing, the business verticals like marketing, then sales, finance, etc. Such effective communication between the various departments will bring more cohesiveness in business, better interpersonal relationships, and ultimately result in higher growth of business as well as profits for the organization. And because this paper is about human resource management, so we need to understand the importance of HR and effective communication. HR professionals, they are at the step 1, that is creation of the message, even at the last step of communication, that is collection of feedback. So they act as a promoter of effective organizational communication. They act as the key strategic partner in leveraging the relationships between the employees and the top management. Herein the fundamental changes in the workforce that is going to impact the employees' expectations, as well as the approach that the HR is going to use when they are communicating with its multi-generational audience is important. So every HR has a different communication style and preference. They should understand the style of the employees as well. The generation that focuses more on technology, or the generation that understands more written communication or face to face, all of these things should be taken into consideration. Furthermore, the new workforce, it tends to be communicated in the most concise manner. They avoid long explanations. So new age workforce, they have to be given the information in the effective communication model. Therefore, we can conclude the HR has a great role in instilling the effective communication that can suit the varied needs of the different generational employees of the organization. So further, It is important that we understand these roles are developed by HR for betterment of the organization. With this, we have come to the end of this lesson. Keep learning with us. Thank you.